Thank you very much for joining me today for today's webinar, Sleeping Better. So I'm Beth Wood, one of the directors of Mind Fitness. Mind Fitness work in organisations throughout the UK and also with individuals in public sessions and events. So this is a slide coming up here of the other two Mind Fitness directors. So on the left is Brian Cooley and on the right, Andy Barker. So Andy sort of heads up the mental health side of the organisation. I head up the mind fitness cognitive side of the operation, and Bri the business skills. And then we have a fantastic marketing team, and that is Irem, Erin and Jess. And then we also have practitioners who work with us in the organisations. And then we have teams of practitioners working in schools on brilliant projects funded by Children in Need. We have a book, which is Unlock You, and that was published by Pearson last year. And actually, we're very lucky, has been nominated for Business Book of the Year award this year, which is fantastic. And something that's very, very dear to my heart is Tembo. So this is Tembo. When we went into lockdown, we already had an app that was being trialled in corporates, and the Mind Fitness digital team decided that we'd very quickly get out a free app for individuals to help people now in the COVID crisis, and that's our app Tembo. So we're actually going to put a slide up at the end to sort of talk about it a little bit more and give you directions of how you can download it. And we really hope that everyone who is on this webinar today will download Tembo. So today's webinar, Sleeping Better, at the end of this, we'll send a recording of this to everyone who's registered, and we'll also send links to recordings of our last webinars. And I'm actually going to send you out 3 sleep audits so that you can see exactly where you are with your sleeping patterns at the moment and hopefully improve them. So like with the last webinars, I'm going to talk for about 50 minutes. And then if you have any questions, please could you put them into the chat function rather than the Q&A function, just so that I've only got one place to look at them at the end. And if you have anything that you'd like to ask that isn't something that you'd want answered publicly, then that's fine as well. Just make sure that that's clear as you ask the question. Brilliant. But I would really like you to grab a pen and paper, because I'm going to ask you, this is your mission, should you choose to accept it, to make a note of anything which you think is surprising or that shocks you as you go through this session. There's certainly an awful lot that surprised me when we first started researching sleep. So this is our course content, the stuff that we'll be looking at today. I'll just talk really briefly. So sleep, good points, bad points. How much sleep do we need? But actually, all the way through today's session, it's at least as much about quality of sleep as it is quantity. Morning larks and night owls, most of you will know that. How do you know if you're sleeping well? Very important. Can you catch up on missed sleep? That's called sleep rebound. That's a really important one. What is sleep governed by? The parts of the body, links between stress and poor sleep, the types of sleep. So as we go through, the 2 types of sleep are REM sleep, rapid eye movement, often called dream sleep, and non-REM sleep. And almost everything that we'll talk about will be related to, one or other of those, and we'll sort of talk about that as we go through. And then the do's and don'ts of good sleep, that's called sleep hygiene. And then we're finishing off with how to address insomnia, such a huge thing at the moment. And we'll talk a little bit about CBTI. So I don't know if any of you know CBTI, but it's cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia. Incredibly effective treatment. So on to the beginning of the workshop then. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So the good first, we'll start with the good. So sleep is just about the single most important thing that we can do to reset our brains and our bodies each day. So there's actually the sort of health trinity, which is sleep, exercise, and nutrition. And for a long time, they were seen as just about equal to each other. But scientists now know that sleep is by far the most important of the three. And there's an absolutely brilliant quote by Matthew Walker. And if you haven't read the book, Matthew Walker's book is really great. And he talks a lot about the elastic band of sleep deprivation can only stretch so far before it snaps. And we'll come back and talk about that a lot as we go through the workshop. In terms of the good, a quote that I really like is that Shakespeare called it the chief nourisher in life's feast. Chief nourisher in life's feast, which is pretty amazing because at the time that Shakespeare was writing, people had no idea how important sleep is or why. So that's really great. All creatures that have so far been studied sleep. Even bacteria have active and passive phases. What actually distinguishes human beings is the amount of REM sleep, rapid eye movement dream sleep, that we have. So in most primates, for example, around 9%, human beings 25%. And what's really interesting, I think, is that so in REM sleep, the muscles are paralyzed so that we don't try and act out our dreams. So when we were sleeping in trees, way back, we had very little ability to generate very much REM sleep, because that's obviously very difficult when you're sleeping in a tree. As soon as we came down to the ground, the amount of REM sleep that human beings generate increased massively, and scientists believe that it's that increase in REM sleep which led to the cognitive development of human species. And I love that because it just shows just how important sleep is. So that is the good. The bad then and the ugly. We've already talked about Matthew Walker's quote. The World Health Organization has declared that sleep deprivation is epidemic. So in fact, just before COVID crisis, it was due to be a really sort of big public campaign because it's seen as so important to mental and physical health. 31% of the population pre-lockdown had insomnia, and scientists think that it's likely to be 50 to 60% by the time we come out of this crisis and we go into whatever is the new norm. That is an extraordinarily high figure, and in most ways that that's measured, that's only about quantity. And as we've said before, quality is at least as important. So as we're going through, I may mention the 3 sleep audits that I'll be sending you and explaining them a little bit as we go through. But we will move on to think about how much sleep then we need. So quantity first. So adults need 7 to 9 hours sleep. And actually most scientists are now much more in the 8 hours than 7. Older adults are really interesting. So it used to be thought that anybody over 60 didn't need as much sleep. But we now know that that's just because they can't generate as much sleep. They actually need it, but they're not able to generate it. And that's because the same parts of the brain that start to degrade that lead to dementia and Alzheimer's are the same parts that generate sleep. So there's actually an awful lot of research going on at the moment to see if there's ways of electrochemically stimulating brain waves to help elderly people sleep and therefore to prevent dementia. So actually for quite a long time, they didn't know whether it was the dementia leading to the sleep loss or the other way around, but now they know it's the sleep loss leading to the dementia. So it's incredibly important, especially for people that are coming into the age group. For teenagers, it's 8 to 10 hours, and for children, 9 to 11. So that's a substantial amount of sleep that we need. Morning larks and night owls. So one of the things that I really loved when we first started doing the research was how many myths we kind of debunked. And I really thought that the morning larks and the night owls would be one of those. old wives' tale, but actually the science totally bears it out. So most of you will be familiar with the idea that some people get up really early in the morning, but are really struggling by the night time, and others find it a massive problem to get up in the morning, but are working their best at 1 o'clock in the morning. And the reason that that happened historically in an evolutionary sense is because when we were hunter-gatherers, that gave a two-tier sort of sleeping party to take care and protect the tribe. So it still exists today, and it's really actually important, because if you're a night owl, you're seriously disadvantaged by the working structure that we have in Western civilization. So, and we know now that if you are a night owl and you're forced to get up early, that a percentage of your prefrontal cortex will remain disabled and offline through most of the morning. And actually, people that are forced to get up early and are night owls are much more predisposed to illnesses, anxiety, depression, diabetes, heart attacks, and stroke. So I would say, when we come out of this, and in a lot of cases, we'll be looking at restructuring working patterns, then to bear that in mind is something that, makes complete sense if organisations can be a little bit more flexible than they have been in the past. So how do we know when we're sleeping well? So these are the 5 things that you really need to look for. So the first one, if you're managing to get the recommended amount of sleep. Second one, if you wake in the morning and you feel absolutely refreshed, particularly if you can wake without an alarm clock, if you can hold your focus throughout the day, and last one, if you can function optimally before noon without caffeine. So if you tick all of those boxes, you're pretty rare, but you're doing really, really well. Although we will, as we said, talk about quality as well as we go through. A question that we get asked all the time is, can you catch up on lost sleep? Can you catch up on lost sleep? And catching up is called sleep rebound. And the answer pretty much is no, that you can't. And, that's not something that anyone likes to hear. So to give you a more precise answer, if you have a bad night's sleep, so this isn't a completely lost night's sleep, but a bad night's sleep, then over the next 3 very good nights sleep, you'll catch up 30% of what you've lost. What actually will happen is for the first night, your brain will only take non-REM sleep. Second night, the same. Third night, it will feast only on REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, and then you will be caught up your 30% of what you've lost. And that's only if you have 3 really good nights after 1 bad night. Whereas what we tend to do is, we go, okay, I'll sleep at the weekend or at the end of the project, and it's almost impossible. Well, it is impossible to catch up properly on the sleep that you've lost. To give another example, if you have 10 days in a row of 6 hours sleep a night, which is, just a couple of hours underneath, that's the equivalent of 1 whole missed night in terms of impaired cognitive function. So it's, having regular sleep all the time is absolutely key and important. So thinking next then about what sleep is governed by. So this is what parts of our body make us go to sleep, pretty much. So the first one is the circadian rhythm. That's our body clock. I think most people will have sort of heard of that. Interestingly, it doesn't go in a 24-hour cycle. It actually goes on a 24-hour and 15-minute cycle. If we were kept in a dark cave, that's what it would do. And it resets itself back to 24 hours using sunlight and a few other sort of recognitions as well, but mostly by the sunlight. The second one there is melatonin, and that is released by the pineal gland. And melatonin It is released around sunset. So when it starts to get dark, it's released for about 12 hours. And it's interesting because it doesn't actually send us to sleep. It doesn't cause sleep pressure. What it does is it sort of instructs us that we are going to become sleepy soon. It gives us the advance warning, if you like, that we're about to become sleepy. It prepares us for sleep. And then the last one is adenosine. So our adenosine level builds from the time that we wake up in the morning, and that is what governs our sleep pressure. And when there's enough adenosine in our body, then we want to go to sleep. What's interesting, of course, is that it goes down through the night. But if we have a bad night's sleep, we don't sleep enough, then there's still adenosine in our body the next morning. And that's how we become fatigued and tired, and why we don't feel good after a night's sleep. Interestingly, the circadian rhythm and the adenosine aren't actually connected to each other. Most of the time they will work in alignment, and if they become misaligned, that's one of the causes of sleep disorders, but they're not actually connected, which is interesting. So the next bit we're going to talk about is probably the most important, and that is stress and poor sleep. I love the picture, the links between stress and poor sleep. And there's a very lovely quote that I like by Charlotte Bronte: "A ruffled mind makes a restless pillow." And we all know that. We all know what that feels like. So the link between stress and poor sleep is bidirectional. So that means that stress will cause lack of sleep and poor sleep quality as well. And poor sleep will cause stress, and it goes round in a circle. And the main reason is because REM sleep, if we don't get enough REM sleep, then our amygdala, for those of you who did the Managing Anxiety webinar, you'll remember me talking about that then. So if you go in through the ears and through the eyes, you get to two tiny parts of the brain called the amygdala, and that's what instigates our fight or flight response. And when we don't get enough REM sleep, then the amygdala becomes hyperactive. And when the amygdala is hyperactive, then the world becomes a much more frightening place. And that's one of the key reasons why there's such a big link between stress and sleep disorders. So in a way, the whole Mind Fitness program will help you to sleep better, because what we're trying to do through pretty much all that we do is bring down levels of stress and also increase positivity. There's numerous ways that you can do that in terms of the Mind Fitness process. So reducing anxiety by reframing negative beliefs, we'll come back to right at the very end when we're looking at CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And I just want to mention here mindfulness. So there's really good research now that shows that mindfulness practice will help better sleep. In Tembo, the app that I mentioned at the very beginning, you can actually type in unable to sleep as a problem, and it will give you lots of exercises. There's one sort of mindfulness-based meditation that I think is really worth just mentioning here, which is a body scan. A lot of you will have done a body scan before. The one that we have in Tembo incorporates releasing muscles so that it really does do everything that can possibly be done to help generate sleep. The other thing that's important and seems to work really well is guided meditation. And I think the reason for that is that many people get stressed about not being able to sleep. And then the last thing, you know, one of the hardest things that you can do at that point is to try and clear your mind. Whereas a guided meditation is sometimes much, much easier to follow the focus and just let everything else go as noise around you. So I'm going to do a guided meditation now. It's called Butterflies. Again, it is on Tembo, so if you want to look it up, that's brilliant. So wherever you are now, if you just get yourself comfortable and close your eyes. And just for a moment, connect with the breath. Don't try and change it, just notice it. And now I'd like you to imagine that you're standing in the clearing of a forest. Just spend a minute to look around you, everything you can see, the sounds you can hear, any smells. It's absolutely beautiful and it's a lovely sunny day. And then in the distance, you see a flock of butterflies coming towards you. And again, you notice just how beautiful they are, the shape of their wings, the texture, the colors. And they start to fly around you just a few feet away from your body. And then you notice that some of the butterflies have moved inside you and they're moving through your body, healing anything which needs to be healed. Just take a moment to notice which parts of your body they're focusing on and what that feels like and the difference when they've been healed. And as they're doing that, you see that the butterflies that are still flying around you are taking your negative thoughts and beliefs and all your worries onto their wings and flying them away. And when the butterflies that are inside your body have finished their work, they rejoin the others, they fly around you one last time, and then they hover in front of you. You feel absolutely connected to the butterflies, almost as if they're saying goodbye to you. And then you watch them fly off into the distance. You have just a moment to recognize what a profound experience this has been. And in your own time, just open your eyes and come back to the present moment. So butterflies is one of my very favorite guided meditations, but there are lots of different ones on Tembo. So, find the one that you think works best for you. In terms of another kind of exercise that's often used, it is parking your worries. Some of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with this. So some cognitive behavioral therapists ask people to write a list of their worries, but they're only allowed to concentrate on them, focus on them for 10 minutes a day. And if you're focused on for that 10 minutes a day isn't within the last 3 hours before going to bed, then that also is a very effective way of reducing the anxiety and helping you to sleep. Relaxing at bedtime. So we tend to think that bedtime, getting ready for bed, is the last few minutes. And actually, we should be thinking of it as the last 2 or even 3 hours before we go to bed. There's a lovely quote by Mahatma Gandhi, which is, "Man should forget his anger before he lies down to sleep." Actually, what we should try and do is bring down all of the intensity of any kind of emotion. So we're getting ourselves to a relaxed state as possible before we go to bed. It's even good in the room that we're in. If you can gradually dim the lights, that's really effective in terms of bringing down your emotional state so that you're at a place of relaxation before you go to bed. And I suppose linked to that is the idea of acceptance. So again, we'll revisit this at the end with cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. But so I had a pretty bad insomnia for 2 years in my pre-Mind Fitness days. And I know that what turned it around was stopping fighting it, of just going, okay, I accept that at the moment my sleeping patterns are not great, but I'm doing all I can, and they're very gradually moving in a better direction. And from the moment that I truly accepted where I was, then my sleep patterns began to improve pretty fast. So acceptance, again, is a really important part of the therapy that's offered with CBTI. And keeping sleep regular. So again, this is one of the bits that I'm sure no one is going to want to hear, but actually going to bed at the same time each day and getting up at the same time each day is probably the message that sleep scientists would most like people to take on, to adopt. because then we're in sync with our circadian rhythm, our body clock. Having lay-ins at the weekend and different times what we're doing is we're self-sabotaging. We're fighting our body clock all the time. There are obviously times when we can't do that. So, one I was thinking of was jet lag. So if you go to a time zone, for example, that's 9 hours different, your circadian rhythm can only catch up 1 hour a day. So it takes you 9 days of cognitive impairment before you get back to full thinking quality, which is pretty amazing. And the really key one is shift workers. With shift work, there's an ongoing disruption of the circadian rhythm all the time. So over 30% of shift workers have chronic sleep disorder. And then many of them also have obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Again, I would say when we get out of this and people are restructuring working programs, trying as much as we can to get away from the idea of shift work would be really good for mental and physical health. So we're going to look now at the different types of sleep. I've sort of mentioned them a little bit. So there are 2 types of sleep: REM sleep, rapid eye movement, and non-REM sleep. So NREM and REM. And basically they fight each other for domination over the brain through the night on roughly a 90-minute cycle. And to explain why that happens, I'm just going to tell you a tiny bit about what happens to the brain during sleep. So during the day, everything we experience, all our memories, are placed into temporary storage in the hippocampus, the bit of the brain that's lit up there. And then what happens during the night, absolutely brilliant, is that sleep spindles come in, just little spindles, and they conduct a file transfer process, taking each bit out of the hippocampus and placing them pretty much individually into the main cortex. So that's what happens during sleep. So we're going to show a figure which is of the 2 different kinds of sleep and how it works through the night. This is the only sort of technical diagram, I promise, but it is really worth showing because in terms of the non-REM sleep, as you can see, there's stage 1 through to stage 4, going from lighter sleep to deep sleep. And when we're talking about quality of sleep, we are talking mostly about deep sleep, but actually we need all 4 stages for really good quality of sleep. And then in terms of REM sleep, so it goes non-REM, REM, non-REM, REM, non-REM, REM, through the cycles through the night. And as you can see, the last cycle has the largest quantity of REM sleep. So what that means, this is why this is so important, is that if you have 25% less sleep than you should be getting, you're likely to be getting 60 to 90% less REM sleep. And we've already talked about the links to the amygdala, but actually REM sleep is key, we'll look at it in a second, to mental and emotional health. Really, really key. So that's a critical loss to lose 60 to 90% of it. Generally, the non-REM sleep is about cognitive function and abilities, focusing, concentration, memory. And the REM sleep is very much tied around mental and emotional health. And they work absolutely together, and you need both of them. So non-REM sleep is sometimes called synaptic pruning, because what happens during non-REM sleep is literally memories and experiences are pruned to leave room for the new ones. And then during REM sleep, they're integrated into the existing neural connections. So the new ones are integrated into what's already existed before. And as they do that, they blend them and they interconnect and they detail them. So REM sleep is absolutely critical. We're going to look now just for a moment at the effects on our body and our brain and our emotions of both sleep and lack of sleep. But just to say, before we sort of go into each in a tiny bit more detail, the reason I think that we don't take enough consideration of sleep is because for a really long time scientists couldn't explain it well enough. You know, it's fairly recent that we've known as much as we know now, and it's coming in still thick and fast. You know, for a long time, sleep scientists said that there would be one thing, the holy grail, that sleep would be responsible for. And we now know that there's thousands of benefits. I love this quote from the Dalai Lama: sleep is the best meditation. Pretty much all that happens to the brain in meditation happens in sleep, but at a more intense level. And Matthew Walker, again, from his book Why We Sleep, says, no facet of the human body is spared the crippling, noxious harm of sleep loss. And that is pretty much true. Literally every physical, mental and emotional function that we have comes from sleep, is really dependent on good sleep. So thinking about the body first, this is a list of some of the things that happen to the body. So routinely sleeping less than 6 to 7 hours a night, because it demolishes the immune system, doubles our risk of cancer. Isn't that incredible? It also there's increased risk of infection, diabetes, blood pressure, heart attack, stroke, Alzheimer's and dementia, sensitivity to pain, infertility, and obesity. I mean, actually, in terms of obesity, it's a kind of double whammy, because it produces too much ghrelin, which is controls our hunger, which means that we overeat, and then it reduces our level of leptin, which means that we never feel full. So obesity and lack of sleep, and lack of good sleep, quality sleep, is really key. In terms of the brain, as we've said, so our brain, the ability to memorize and make logical choices and decisions, is highly dependent on sleep. So a lot of the sleep spindles, that stuff, happens in stage 2 and 3 of non-REM sleep. So we need a good night's sleep before we learn anything, and then critically, we need a good night's sleep after we learn something, because otherwise that learning is not consolidated. You know, it's learning that you absolutely will have lost, and that's so important. And lack of sleep can also lead to a huge amount of mental disorders, including ADHD and bipolar, and lots more that there's a lot of really good current research into. In terms of emotions and mood, we're really here talking, as we said, about REM sleep. So we talked earlier about how important REM sleep was to the amygdala, to make sure it doesn't become hyperactive, because if it does, that's more anxiety, world becomes a more frightening place to live. But in fact, REM sleep recalibrates all of our emotional circuitry. So it restructures the parts of our brain that are responsible for human connectivity, for emotional intelligence, for creativity, and key, it provides a neurochemical bath that helps us to come to terms with painful experiences. So that's really, really important. And it's only in REM sleep, is absolutely the only time of the day when our body is absolutely clear of noradrenaline, sometimes called norepinephrine, which is one of the chemicals that most highly triggers anxiety. So we really need good quality REM sleep, absolutely key. And I would say, you know, even without these myriad of effects on the body and on the brain, even if it was only that it was making us have poor choices, make poor choices, then wouldn't that affect every aspect of our lives? You know, if we just think about, say, you know, poor choices in terms of, I don't know, drink driving, driving when we're fatigued, you know, to name just a couple. So poor choices, obviously, are really will affect the quality of our life and us achieving our potential and feeling positive and happy. So moving into the do's and the don'ts of sleeping better. As I said before, that's called sleep hygiene. And there's a lovely quote by another Elizabethan playwright, Thomas Becker. Sleep is the golden chain that ties health and our bodies together. Again, as I said, extraordinary that the Elizabethan playwright spoke so much and so eloquently about sleep when so very little was known about it. So in terms of the do's first, as we've said, going to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time each day, keeping regular sleep pattern, one of the most important things that you can do. Social connections is very important to good quality sleep. You know, it's one of the reasons why sleep scientists think that the insomnia rate is going to be a lot higher at the end of this period than it was pre-lockdown. Temperature is very important. So our body actually has to drop 2 degrees before we can go to sleep. So making sure that we sleep in a room that's, you know, pretty cool, 18.3 is usually thought to be ideal. Also having a hot bath just before you go to bed, the last couple of hours, because your temperature will rise, and then when you come out of the bath, it will actually fall. So that's why a hot bath helps you to go to sleep. And interestingly, hot bath in the last 2 hours before you go to bed will generate 15% deeper sleep in non-REM sleep, which is really fascinating. Exercise, as most people know, is very important in terms of sleep. So the burning of energy basically increases the adenosine levels. So that's why it's so key. And about 150 minutes of exercise a week is what's usually recommended for people that have insomnia or poor sleep. Dimming the lights, as we've said, in the room where you're preparing to go to bed for the last sort of 2 to 3 hours is really good. Keeping it dark in the bedroom once you've gone into the bedroom is much easier for us to go and stay asleep, actually. Removing visible clocks is usually recommended. Any kind of pre-sleep routines that you can instigate. So in terms of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, that's called sleep cues. And so we've talked before in some of the other webinars about building new neural pathways, and our brain will always go down the route of least resistance, the pathway that is strongest and robust. So if you get into a pattern of doing X, Y, and Z before bedtime, then your brain knows that after X, Y, and Z, it's time to go to sleep. So developing sleep cues is really lovely, really good, effective. One that I find just, I don't know, it just makes me feel warm, is rocking. So a recent study in Switzerland had beds on ropes that were rocking, and it generated deeper sleep, especially deeper non-REM sleep, which is so interesting, isn't it? In terms of, you know, rocking chairs, rocking cradles, and rocking babies in our arms when we didn't know that there was a scientific reason to do that. So I love that. Coming then into the don'ts, I'm afraid some of these aren't going to be too popular. So first one is alcohol. So alcohol will help you to go to sleep immediately, but it cuts out the deeper non-REM sleep, and critically, it cuts out almost all REM sleep. So alcohol is second only to sleeping pills, which I'll talk about in a minute, in terms of cutting out REM sleep. So that is really serious. Nicotine, again, because you have mini withdrawal symptoms during the night, you get a very disturbed night's sleep. Caffeine, so everyone will know this, but the reason why caffeine is so bad is because it latches onto the receptors that the adenosine needs, and so it wipes out the effect of the adenosine. So you don't get any sort of sleep pressure. And caffeine lasts in your body an extraordinarily long time. It's got a half-life of 5 to 7 hours. So you really have to be having, you know, any caffeine sort of lunchtime pretty much for it not to affect you going to sleep. In terms of food, try to avoid diets that really restrict the amount of food that you eat, because your body will react against that and sleeping patterns get worse. And try not to snack late at night. They think that happens not because of actual hunger, but a fear of hunger, because we know that we're going through so many hours without being able to eat. But if you snack at night, then your gut, your intestine is, instead of cleaning and clearing and resting, it's going to be digesting. So that is not good for sleep. Snoozing late at night or in the evenings, again, not good, because your adenosine levels will go down and then there's not enough there when you want to go to bed. That's actually even more true for people over 60. So if you fall into that age category, really try to avoid snoozing in the evening. One that is not popular is LED light. So the light that comes from phones and from iPads will reduce your melatonin level by 50%. So it will, you won't be getting the instruction to your body that you should be feeling sleepy. So really try to avoid phones and iPads for the last couple of hours before you go to bed. Lying awake at night is seen by all sleep specialists to be a bad thing. So, part of the CBTI thing would be to get out of bed, do something, go back when you're tired, because otherwise you're telling your brain that it's okay to be lying awake in bed, because that's your pattern, that's your neural pathway. It's really important that your brain associates being in bed with going to sleep. And sleeping pills. So there really isn't there's no sleeping pill on the market currently. I mean, the new ones are much better than the old ones, but there's no sleeping pill which produces anything like natural sleep. What it's doing is sedating you. It's knocking out part of the prefrontal cortex. It produces a kind of electrical sleep brainwaves that get nowhere near to the kind of deep brainwaves that you would normally have in non-REM sleep. And as we mentioned very briefly, it knocks out almost all REM sleep. In addition to that, most people that take sleeping pills feel groggy during the day, still sleepy during the day, so then they tend to have caffeine, and that is the vicious cycle. And then when you want to stop taking the sleeping tablets, the withdrawal process is severe. It leads to a spike in insomnia severity. That's called rebound insomnia. It's really hard, and if that wasn't all bad enough, then the death rate of people that rely on sleeping tablets is 4.6, the national average, and it's 3.6 for people that use them irregularly. So I would definitely say, and the reason why I've put the sort of CBTI bit after this is, if you're currently using sleeping tablets, or somebody that is, if you can make the change to use cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, that I would definitely recommend that. The third of the stress audits that I'll send out after this to you is about the do's and don'ts, so that you can sort of look and see where you are with the do's and don'ts at the moment, and then how you can improve. So coming into the final section, which is about insomnia and cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI. So there's a lovely quote here. There are 12 hours in the day and above 50 hours in the night. Marie de Rubertin-Chantal. She's actually a famous letter writer, great philosophy, and if you haven't read her letters, then do. But I'm sure most people will recognise what that feels like, the endless night when you can't sleep. So as we said, 31% of the population pre-COVID, probably considerably more by the time we come through the other side of this. And people with insomnia, apart from all the physical, mental, emotional effects that we've talked about earlier, which may not be recognised as the results of poor sleep, are likely to feel fatigued, low energy. They're likely to have a decreased performance at work and mood disturbances. That's sometimes what leads people to seek help. So there's acute insomnia, and that's usually a temporary thing, and it can be associated with a life event. So, not being able to sleep before an exam, or it could be excitement actually before, say, your wedding, something like that, through to chronic insomnia, and that is where it's at least 3 nights a week for at least 3 months. That's what is usually counted as chronic insomnia. So just thinking for a last few minutes about CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So sleep specialists now recommend CBTI as the best form of treatment for insomnia. And that's partly because we know a lot more about the side effects of sleeping tablets. And it's partly because the research is much more solid now about what CBTI can achieve. So there's 3 sort of sections, 3 parts of CBTI, and it's absolutely possible for you to do it for yourself. So I'm going to go through, outline what each of those 3 are. So the first one is sleep restriction therapy, sometimes called sleep efficiency therapy. And to be honest, it feels a little bit counterintuitive. So this is Sleep Audit 2. That I'm going to be sending out to you. And what would happen if you went to a CBTI specialist, they would ask you to fill in a diary, something like this, for at least a week, to see how much, so your sleep efficiency is your total hours in bed, percentage of, so hours of sleep as a percentage of your total hours in bed. So for example, you go to bed at 10 and you get up at 10, so you've got 12 hours in bed, but only 6 of those you're asleep, so your sleep efficiency is 50%. So if they work out that your sleep efficiency is 85% or under, then they would recommend this as treatment. And what they would do is see over a week what your average hours sleep a night is, and then your sleep opportunity, so that's your total time in bed, would be restricted to that for a period of 6 weeks. So if you only got those 6 hours sleep a night, that's your average, they would set a wake up time, so let's say 6 a.m. That means your going to bed time is 12 midnight, and you're only allowed to go to bed, that's now your sleep opportunity, so your sleep opportunity is restricted for a period of time. So if you're going along with this kind of treatment, you have to kind of agree to understand that for a little while it probably means that you're going to sleep less than you do, but what you'll be doing is to reset your body clock. So your long-term insomnia will be solved, and it is incredibly effective treatment. The second thing that they would use, sometimes one or the other, or that or sleep restriction therapy, is stimulus control. And that's basically only going to bed when you're tired, not staying in bed if you're not going to sleep. So if you're lying awake, get up, do something, only returning to bed when you feel tired. And also they would use sleep cues, as we said before. So a pattern that you would have just before you went to bed that you would regulate yourself with, so that your brain would expect sleep at the end of that pattern. And then the third thing that would happen with CBTI, of course, as with all cognitive behavioral therapy, is the work to reduce anxiety because of the bidirectional links between stress and sleep, bad sleep, as we've said. So that might be doing all of the things that you might have done with me on some of the other webinars to reduce anxiety. So reducing, say, changing demands to preferences. So it might be, instead of saying I must sleep for 8 hours, it will be changing it to I would prefer to sleep for 8 hours, but I understand that and accept that I'm not at that point yet, but my sleep patterns are moving in the right direction. So as we said before, it's a lot about acceptance. So whenever you're changing a demand to a preference, it's going from the I must, I have to, I shoulds, to I would prefer that, ... but ... So that's also a really important part of CBTI. So we're coming into our conclusion now, our last couple of minutes, and we have an amazing breakthrough. And I want you, I want you just to have a look at our amazing breakthrough. So scientists have discovered this amazing revolutionary new treatment that makes you live longer. And I want you to spend 30 seconds reading through the rest of the things that this amazing revolutionary treatment does. Enhances memory, more attractive, keeps you slim, protects you from cancer and dementia, colds, heart attacks, stroke, diabetes, and you're going to feel happier and less depressed and less anxious. If we had that, if we were offered that on the television, you know, how much would we pay for that? You know, I would say a pretty extraordinary amount. And what is interesting is I think that even if it was something that needed a time investment as well as a monetary investment, we'd probably still go for it. So maybe one of the reasons that we don't put the value that we should on sleep is because it's free. I think because it's free and because historically there hasn't been enough good research to show us why we need to think of it more highly. So I'm going to actually show you the whole of the Shakespeare quote that I mentioned at the beginning. So sleep that knits up the ravelled sleep of care, the death of each day's life, sore labour's bath, balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast. You know, pretty nearly says it all about sleep. And so, you know, just to end, I just want to say, you know, it's not just for the people that are the 31% or whatever that is now, 50% of people that have actual insomnia. Even for those of us that are maybe around the 6 to 7 hours sleep a night, you know, we have no idea of what our potential would be if we were having the 8 hours sleep a night, you know, because even for a small amount under that, there is cognitive dysfunction and impairment. We're not achieving our potential, you know, and that is an exciting thing because it, you know, we can really, it's something that we can work towards. You know, I would definitely say for almost everybody that having better sleep, quality as well as quantity, we should be making one of our most important goals. So that's the end of the talking bit. So thank you very much for attending this. I'm going to put the slides up now before going into the Q&A, just because I know that there's maybe people that can't stay for the question and answer. So this is all of our links. The Mind Fitness website is on there. There's free resources on the website that we give resources all the time on our Facebook. And then at the top is the app that I mentioned, so Use Tembo. And unlike most apps, you can go into Use Tembo, you just put it, so you just type usetembo.app into your browser and then you sign in and then it works like any other app. But unlike all other sort of mindfulness-based apps, what you can do with Tembo is you can type in a problem. So you can say problem with a difficult boss or maintaining relationships. But if you type in unable to sleep better, it will give you a whole load of exercises that you can use and techniques. So please do sign in to Use Tembo, because there's lots of really great resources that are linked to what I've been talking about today. So I'm now going to press on the chat button, chat function, and see what the comments are. Oh, I have to go back up to the top, so just give me a second. Oh, thank you very much. Excellent. Oh, thank you. We have a couple of congratulations on the book nomination, which is lovely. I don't know if I'm actually allowed to say this yet, maybe I'm not, but WH Smith have chosen it as their business book of the month for August as well, which is really absolutely lovely. Okay, so someone has asked that they said that they have a nap after lunch. Is that good or bad? So interestingly, so human beings now have monophasic sleep. We only sleep at night. We were originally programmed for biphasic sleep. So we used to have a nap at lunchtime, and so that sort of went by the wayside for Mediterranean countries within the last generation, which meant that they did quite a lot of research around what was happening to people as they gave up their siesta. And actually there were really it affected people's physical and mental health adversely. So there's a lot of scientists that still say biphasic sleep pattern would be more healthy. So Martin, I would say you're fine to have a nap after lunch. So I would say try and make it not more than 2 hours. That was the old sort of siesta amount of time that people have got down to. But yeah, as long as it's after lunch and not later in the evening, that's absolutely fine. Got one here. So is there a difference or a reason as to whether you remember your dreams or not? I haven't gone into dreams too much through this session, because it's still a hugely sort of contentious issue. There's a lot of very interesting research that's going on into dreams at the moment. So I would say that if you're in a highly emotional state, you're more likely to remember your dreams than you're not. That seems to be fairly well substantiated. If you wake up before the end of a REM sleep pattern, you're more likely to remember your dreams than if you've got to the end of a pattern. One of the things, just really quickly, sort of not quite that question, but the creative, the dream-based effects of REM sleep bleed into the first few 6 minutes of being awake. So an awful lot in the past, you know, so Einstein and various other people decided that they would set their mind a task and then go to sleep on it. We still have that expression, don't we, to sleep on something, and then to get the results, the answers when you wake up. And they think that that's because we're still in that creative state for the first few minutes after we wake from REM sleep, as long as we're coming from REM sleep. So yeah, why not make the most use of that? I always try and make sure that I think something positive in those first 6 minutes, because definitely if you go into negative thinking, it's much more likely to hound you for the rest of the day. So try and keep your first few minutes positive. Thank you for all the people that have said that they love the butterflies. I love the butterflies too. I work with quite a lot of people that have very high level anxiety, and butterflies is one of the most effective exercises. So someone has said that, who does a drama class with me, if they took 2 to 3 hours to get ready to sleep after drama, we wouldn't get to sleep until midnight. And that is the problem with shift work, isn't it? You know, I've worked in theatre for many years, and it is absolutely that. You don't want to go home and go straight to bed and straight to sleep. But that means, you need to, we should be instigating a pattern of regularity around the other way. So I know you can't do it exactly a lot of the time, but the more you can keep to that regular, the pattern, the better. Yeah, so quite a lot of people have said, is it okay to sleep just a little bit later at the weekends? So I'm definitely a morning lark. I get up crazy early. I usually set the alarm for just 1 hour later at the weekend, because it makes you feel like a bit of luxury. Very rarely get to the point where it's actually going off, but yeah, so yeah, it's a balance, it's a compromise. I'm afraid I know nothing about waterbeds. or the relative advantages or disadvantages of waterbeds. I'm sure if you had someone rocking it for you during the night, that would be wonderful, but otherwise, I'm afraid I'm not sure. Any suggestions for night owls? Really, it's, you know, it's managing it as much as you possibly can, trying to make sure that if you're in control of your schedule, at least you're not doing things that are critical to your job. You won't be thinking your best think in the morning. So if there's any way you can reschedule your day so that what's most critical for you to be thinking well, then you can do later in the day, that would be useful. Try and talk to bosses about flexibility. Let's hope that happens after this crisis. Yeah, 10 minutes afternoon nap. Yeah, any kind of short naps after lunch. So some people love them, some people hate them, but they definitely won't be bad for you as long as they're early in the day. How much does alcohol interfere with sleep patterns? Is there a big difference between one glass to sharing a bottle of wine between two? How much would that be? That's like 2 glasses each probably, isn't it? Yeah. So as we've said, it's likely, the trouble is that alcohol has been kind of used as a coping mechanism for people that aren't sleeping well, in the same way as sleeping tablets were. We now know that it probably will help you get to sleep, but how it interferes is you're unlikely to get to that level 4 non-REM of the deepest sleep, and that is critical for brain function. And what it really does is cut out the REM sleep. So, you know, again, I would say, you know, we can't do this because of the way that, you know, our days and our working lives are structured. But in terms of mental health, much better to have a glass of wine at 11 o'clock in the morning than 6 o'clock at night. So, you know, if you can have your wine at lunchtime, I don't know if that's at all possible, but yes, early is better than later. Do you have, oh, okay, there's a couple of questions here on melatonin supplements. So the only research in which they've been really found to be effective is in recovery from jet lag. They don't seem to be very effective otherwise, remembering that melatonin is only about sending you the instruction that you're about to, you know, you feel sleepy rather than actual sleep pressure. The thing that I really would say to be careful of, though, is because they're not registered medically, the ingredients are often far different to what is on the packet. I can't remember the exact details, but there have been 2 recent studies where they found that the melatonin content was up to 4 times higher or 50% lower than what it actually said on the packet. You know, so that's that, you know, I don't know how you could check that, but if there's, you know, try and buy expensive, get it from somewhere that's credible if you need to rely on a melatonin supplement. Restless leg syndrome, can get to sleep. So whether it's from restless leg syndrome or anything else, a sleep specialist, a CBTI specialist, would say if you wake with restless leg or with anything else, try and get up, stay up for a little while, go back to sleep. Don't get frustrated with yourself. So a huge amount of insomnia comes from the pressure that we put upon ourselves of not being able to sleep. You know, we don't sleep because we're worried about not sleeping. It's an incredibly vicious circle. So, you know, you have to accept if that you want to change it, you know, and it will say restless leg syndrome, that I'm going to get up, so when I had really bad insomnia, I would say to myself, okay, I'm going to get up and I'm not going to allow myself to get back to bed for at least an hour, and I'd read or something. And then, so nothing with LED light. And then, you know, after about half an hour going, oh, I could go back now. But if you make yourself, at least for a little while, keep to the hour, then it's the the idea of the sleep restriction therapy, and you're really, really tired, and you go back to sleep more easily when you go back. People arguing with spouses about how dark or how light the room should be. Yeah, so dark is better in terms of better, deeper sleep, but I know it's not everybody's first preference. Okay, do you have any suggestions on keeping the first 6 minutes positive? Have anxiety and depression often struggle with this. What I do is a gratitude exercise. So as I get out of bed, I don't know if any of you noticed the slide that was up as you were waiting to come into this webinar, the sleep picture of sleep. An artist that I know, Rebecca Bush, painted that, and I absolutely love her pictures, and they're very profoundly about positivity and good mental health. Please do look at her website, she's amazing. So as I get out of bed in the morning, I turn to the side and I have one of her pictures, so that's the first thing that I see in the morning. And while I'm looking at the picture, I breathe and I do a short gratitude exercise. So thinking about 3 or 5 things that I feel profoundly and genuinely grateful for. And as I've talked about on a couple of the other webinars, when we focus on something, it becomes a more intense experience for us. You know, whatever we choose to be fascinated, whatever we choose to find extraordinary, all we need to do is focus on that and it will become more extraordinary. Our gratitude will become deeper. So just focusing on a few things that you're profoundly grateful for, I find is one of the really key things. But there are a lot of different mindfulness and meditation based exercises in Tembo. So, you know, no one size fits all. I would say, you know, try 3 or 5 of them and see which one you find best. Quite a few people who've now said that they're up for wine with lunch. Brilliant. Terrible if I kind of do this webinar and increase sales of wine, won't it? Yes, okay, there's something there which is really worth saying. With melatonin supplements, it's not clear yet of whether that will decrease natural melatonin production. So the science is out really on that at the moment, but a lot of scientists are saying that it's very likely that it would. I don't know if there's any more. Slow memory. Sleep. In any point through your life, one of the things that we can do to build cognitive function and memory is adaptive behavior, because then what we're doing is we're getting our brain used to building new neural pathways. Someone has said, you know, is there anything you can do to make up for any memory loss? So adaptive behavior is adopting a practice of small but constant change, you know, and just build it into your daily life. Put your watch on a different hand, go a different route home, tie your shoelaces up the other way, put the milk in before the tea, you know, just get yourself used to constant change. Then you will build new neural pathways faster and more easily, which will help you with memory. And actually, it's one of the, you know, the things that at the moment is the best form of dementia prevention, because as the synapses decay, you're bringing new ones. It's called cognitive reserve, where you're bringing new reserve synapses in, that are new neural pathways in, that you can use instead of the ones that are decaying. So, you know, really important for that. Can I say a little bit more about sleep quality? So when we're talking about sleep quality, what we mean is experiencing that balance of all 4 stages of non-REM sleep, and critically of getting enough REM sleep. So, you know, a lot of scientists think that the mental health epidemic that we're having at the moment even before COVID, is really related to lack of quality of sleep because people aren't getting enough REM sleep. It's especially true for teenagers because they're getting the lack of REM sleep on top of very low levels of adenosine, largely coming from caffeinated drinks, fizzy drinks. So just pre-COVID, that was due to be a massive campaign in the States and across a lot of Europe, but it didn't happen because of COVID. But yeah, so REM sleep and the deepest levels of non-REM sleep are what we mean when we say quality sleep. And I think I've got to the end of those there. Yeah, I think so. So if I haven't covered anything and you have a question, my email is beth@mindfitness.training. Please do feel free to email me and I'm very happy to come back and talk to you. Please do join any of our Mind Fitness community arenas and please do download the app Tembo. We really want to spread the message and help it to reach as many people as possible. And please do recommend it. It's totally free. Please do recommend it to anyone else that you think would benefit. So thank you very much for joining us today for today's webinar on sleeping better. And we hope to see you for the next one. Thank you.